Hola, ¿cómo va? ¿Me escuchan? A ver. Vamos. Hola, ¿cómo va? Hola, ¿qué tal? Ahí va. ¿Cómo va? ¿Cómo va? ¿Todo bien, Diego? ¿Qué tal, Gaby? Ahí, ahora esperamos a Joshua. Así arrancamos. Estoy acá con mi mate, como siempre. Ah, ¿Tú bien? Vamos a esperar a ver cómo va. Bueno, es un hermoso día para tomar mate, como siempre digo. No puede conseguir de la buena miel que le suelo poner. Ahí está, ahí se unió Joshua. Ahí está. Uh, y... Hey, hi.
How are you?
Oh, good. Ready. Like with my mate as usual.
I could use some of that right now. I'm going to go this way so the light is not shining behind my head. I think that's a
Oh,
little
okay.
better. Yeah.
Well, so we're waiting, everyone. The idea, well, is to start with, well, your beginning as an actor. I know you start, you were from the start an actor. I mean, when you were little, you decided to become an actor. That was the story.
Yeah, as a little kid, my father was a photographer and he took a photograph of me and won some competition in New York where I grew up. And then I wanted to do it professionally, but my parents were both working and they didn't want any part of that. So I I did, school plays and small things like that, but I didn't actually get involved in theater properly until I was in college. And then when I was in college, I sort of rediscovered the love that I felt as a kid, and so then that's when I started to properly pursue it and train and things like that.
I think there was a short called "Mad in Love." That's your first official short, right?
Yes, yeah, that was an NYU graduate thesis, and the director was engaged to one of my childhood best friends. So I had a little bit of nepotism to help me do that. I had a very small role in it, but that's the first. I think that might be the first film that I actually did. Yeah.
And what about your first role in television? I assume you start. When did you decide to start doing going to castings to do television?
So I went to a drama school that was taught by a man named William Esper, who was he was Sanford Meisner's protege, and he became sort of the most well-known Meisner teacher in the world. And when I got out of school, I was in New York. I started doing some theater. And actually, I think the first television job I ever did was on a television show that Dennis Leary was on called The Job. And it was a very weird role because there's a really kind of silly comedy. I don't know if you've ever heard of, called Weekend at Bernie's, and it's all about a dead body. That was basically hello, Mr. Alprin. One of my friends has joined, and the episode was basically like a Weekend at Bernie's, where I played this homeless guy who had died, and so every scene we tried to figure out. It was a strange and fun role because it was the most physical comedy you could come up with, where I could put myself, how I could collapse, and so that was my first television job that I've ever had. And then the first one I got in LA was on a show called Seventh Heaven, and it was playing a paranoid schizophrenic steroid addict
Oh,
who thought that he was Napoleon Bonaparte.
oh. And what about, and when you arrived to LA, you started working as an actor only, or you just start doing like these coaching actor jobs?
So I came to LA after my first real major acting coaching job, which was, as we talked about briefly, I was Eminem's acting coach on the set of 8 Mile, which came from a strange series of events of me reading for a role, being at the callbacks, them flying me to Detroit to play Eminem's role in the screen tests, and then
Wow.
Em and I spending the afternoon talking about how I did what I did. And then I wound up being there for a number of months. So I had had my first, with no intention of becoming an acting coach or teacher, I'd had my first sort of big job at that point. And then, and then when I got to LA, I came to be an actor, and I got offered an opportunity to help someone open an acting school. And so I just kind of worked as an assistant teacher. And then over the years, it's really just kind of blossomed into my own school with a number of students. And, you know, I've been lucky enough to have some really talented students, one of whom I'm pretty sure you interviewed, Christopher Kelly. And
Yeah.
Chris and I are now colleagues and have done a couple of films together, and talking about another one, along with his partner, Jessica. Both of them were students of mine out here.
Oh wow! And what as a coach, actor, I mean, how do you develop your work? For example, with 8 Mile, with Eminem, how do you approach this coaching? It's,
So for me, with M, it was a very interesting experience because he'd never acted, but he was, you know, he's an artist. So he's open emotionally. And I was a hip hop kid. I was big into hip hop music. My friends were hip hop artists in New York. And so I would, you know, the way in which I was taught was the idea that acting is doing. So in action. And so I would basically interpret acting notes and actions kind of into hip hop terms. And
mm,
because of that, Em and I, we had a mutual language. So
mm,
what was great about him is he's such a musicality to him that he was very much able to take any note given and interpret it. And he also was kind of a remarkable student. He had no ego. He was not, all he wanted to do was give the best performance possible, which made it really, really fantastic, you know? And then from there, when I came out to LA, you know, I was trained in the Meisner technique. So that roots a lot of how I teach and what I teach. But I've done, you know, as many of us are in these fields, we've touched on and worked with different kinds of techniques. So in the end, I kind of try to read actors in the moment, see what would operate best for them, and go with what my gut and instinct will tell me to do.
it is normal for a movie to contact contract like hire, I mean, acting coach for every actor, or it's just
No, I think for that, film, it was done because M had never really acted before.
mm,
Um, hey Kim, hey Greg, and so it's nice when you see your friends pop up. They M had never acted before, and I think they had brought someone in from Los Angeles, like a very well known, well renowned acting teacher, a very very talented woman. But I think because of Marshall and my having similar kind of stories and having a similar kind of language, they found that he responded to me in a way that he wasn't responding to that acting coach. So I was the most surprised person on that set when they asked me to coach him, for sure,
mm.
you know. And then I wound up being there for 4.5 months every day with him. Actually, that guest star on The Job with Dennis Leary, I booked while in Detroit, and they gave me a week off and flew me back to New York so I could shoot it. That's right. That was
Wow.
at the same time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was very cool.
And what about your big breakthrough? That was the Pacific, because after working in television, you have the chance to work in a show produced by Steven Spielberg with Tom Hanks, with, well, a lot of very known actors. So, How did you cast for that role?
So there's a little bit of a story to it, at least for me, which was I had a very hard time finding an agent, and I got called by a casting director who I'd met through a friend to be a reader, to be the other actors were reading without auditions, and for a new series, for a pilot, which I wound up booking one of the leads on from being just the person in the room, and then the producers decide. So from that job, that casting director sent my tape to an agent who decided to represent me. And the second audition they ever sent me on was the Pacific. And I read for the role of Lecky, which is one of the leads, in December. 3.5 months later, I was told I had a callback for JP Morgan, which is the name of a bank here. So I thought it was for a commercial and was very confused. And my agent said, no, JP Morgan in the Pacific. And I realized it was a different role. So I read in April. I had another call back the next day. Then I didn't hear anything for a month. So I figured I didn't get it until I was called in for a chemistry read in May. So 5 months later. And they put us in a waiting room. And I'll never forget this. I sat down in this waiting room. There was a desk, and I was sitting at the desk looking at my script. And there was a piece of paper on the table that said, actors we would like to cast. And then next to my role was my name and only my name. And I was very confused because I was there for an audition and I didn't understand how I was on a list. And I turned it upside down, afraid that anybody was going to see me see it and that I was going to get in trouble. And then I read, and the producer said to me on the way out, when we do this next time, I want you to play that moment like that. So I thought there was another callback. But what he told me months later when I was in Australia to shoot, that was me trying to tell you that the role was yours. I had just been told by the casting director I wasn't allowed to tell you that. So I was trying to let you know. So that was how I got that part.
Oh, and you work with a lot of actors. Rami Malek, I think, it is in the Pacific.
Yeah.
Did you have the chance to talk to him, to meet him back then?
The boys in the Pacific, every single one, from Rami, John Seda, John Bernthal, James Badge, any of them, we are like a family. So we all lived in the same, like, it was like a little resort, essentially. We each had our own little apartments. There was a big, giant courtyard in the middle. We'd meet there every night and play games and joke around and drink beer and hang out together. No, Rami's like a brother. He's, he's gone on to do some remarkable things, but, you know, we knew how talented Rami was then. I thought his work in the Pacific was some of the best work in the whole series. So we're all close. You know, I speak to the boys in the Pacific, you know, different ones at different times, but at least a few of them a couple times a week, I'd say, for the last 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
We were talking before about the quality of the HBO shows like the Pacific, and you say something interesting about how they always trying to get the best of the best for this kind of shows, and that is like a continuation of Band of Brothers, but darker. And it's true, it is darker. Can you explain why?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's sort of two questions there, or two ideas. Like, one is HBO has a different model than network television. They want to bring in subscribers, so they don't have to appeal to advertisers. So it seems like pretty much when they started with like 6 Feet Under and the Sopranos, they realized if we can make the kind of television that network television can't, because we don't need to sell ads. So they started to collect what felt like the best scripts. And because of that, I think some of the best artists went, well, if I go to HBO, I may or may not make as much money, but I can make the product that I want to make. I can tell the story I want to tell. And I think for HBO, that very much became their focus. And you know, I guess it's a good segue, because Band of Brothers versus the Pacific kind of shows how they grow and change, because Band of Brothers was made pre 9/11. You know, that the generation in America that fought in World War II is often referred to as the greatest generation. So they're looked at in a lot of ways very heroically, with a lot of things being overlooked, a lot of racism, a lot of things like that, that, you know, is all sort of bubbling up here now. But they were considered sort of the greatest generation, and they made they made Band of Brothers as a way to really get into what that war was and to look at the heroism and what these men had to overcome. The Pacific was made years later. The war in the Pacific was a far darker war when it came to the way they fought. But also now we're post 9/11, and I don't think many people were into the idea of celebrating war. So I really felt like the thesis of the Pacific was what does war do to the men and women that fight it? And so HBO, not worrying about what are people going to like or not, I think went, that's the story of this time, and let's make that story. And so I think there is a bravery to it, you know. I think they have, you know, they're not the only network that's doing this, but I think they're the first one to really make that kind of leap. You know, we were talking before about The Night Of, and The Night Of, I think too, was another deep, you know, honest, raw look into the criminal justice system. And as someone who grew up in New York City, I'd never seen anything that represented the police department, the this, the that, as much as The Night Of did. And they were unapologetic, and they let our creative team really dictate the story we were going to tell. The network was, you know, involved, but they knew they had great artists, so they kind of got out of the way, is what it felt like to me.
Your character Maldonado in The Night Of, it's like it would say. I remember I watched The Night Of a long time ago, but I remember your character being like the nice one in the first episode with the character that play. I can't remember the name of
Riz's character.
Yeah, and I remember being like the nice guy in a toxic environment, I would say, right? Do you feel do you approach a character like that?
Yes. I mean, I'll tell you, the biggest approach I had as someone who grew up in New York and knew people who were cops was, you have cops who are hard asses, and then you have cops who want to just go home. And to me, what I saw in Maldonado more than anything was, I don't want to give anyone a hard time, and I don't want to have a hard time. So maybe the kid had a couple of drinks, but like, let's just let him go. Because if we let him go, we can get off the clock and I can go home. Because 999 times out of 1,000, all that's happening in that instance is the kid goes to jail for 2 days for driving under the influence of alcohol and goes home. So I think he was kind of like a simple guy and a realist. And I think my partner was a rule-oriented person, and she was tough, you know. So I think that helped too. When Afton and I met, I could feel the sort of yin and yang of our energies. And so as she was hard, the harder she was, I kind of felt like it would play to go softer, you know. And that was, I think, and it sort of naturally developed and became really fun, you know, and really special when I saw it. Doing it, I knew it was good. I didn't know how good it was until I saw what Robert Elswit shot and what Steve Zalian had directed, and I realized, like, I'm lucky enough to be in something that's quite special. You know?
Yeah, I also have Sean Turturro playing that character. I love this kind of characters, like he's all wasted, but in the beginning he wants to be famous, but then he starts changing. I love it. I love him doing this kind of roles.
Do you know that was originally James Gandolfini?
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
we shot the pilot with James Gandolfini playing that role, and it was and James, you know, Jimmy picked it on purpose. He wanted to do something very different than Tony Soprano, and then we shot the pilot, and a few months later he passed away. So we had heard, we all just, I mean, it was a remarkable loss. I mean, he was a great artist, and then we thought it was done. You know, I just assumed we were finished. Then they announced for a little while that Robert De Niro was going to play the part.
Wow.
Yeah. And then that didn't happen. And then the next thing I knew, Turturro stepped into the role, and I'm a massive fan. And I was so excited. And then when I saw what he was doing with the itching on the feet and it became impossible to imagine another human being playing that part. You know, I mean, he was magic. My biggest regret of that show is that he didn't win the Emmy, because I think for someone who has a remarkable career, that might be the best work I've ever seen him do, which is saying a lot because it's John Turturro and he's fucking amazing, you know. But it was amazing to watch for sure.
The process, after that, you worked a lot in television. I saw I saw you in The Mentalist, in another shows also, and a question that a casting director from here asked me is, which is the process in American television, the casting process? In your case, who contacts you, then what happens?
Okay, so I mean, the casting process is similar for most jobs. I will say that the casting process for something like The Pacific was far longer. That took place literally over 5 months.
Wow.
Yeah. So from my first audition was December. I booked the job in May. Television guest stars are very quick. You go in on a Wednesday afternoon to read for producers. You'll know by Thursday if you've been what they call pinned, so down to you and maybe one other person. And by Friday, Monday at the latest, you know if you have the role. And oftentimes you're shooting just a few days later. I've had a few jobs where I've gone in on a Thursday and I'm shooting on a Friday. But usually there's like so it's quite quick to turn around. If it's for a regular character on a series, that's a slower process, and that will come, you know, it's typically will be from your agent. You'll get a call, you'll go in for your first audition, often with casting. If you've done enough, if your resume is long enough, you might skip that step and meet with casting director, and producers. Then it could be a week, it could be 3 weeks, where you find out that you're going to screen test. And then it'll be down to you and maybe 4 other guys. And you will all show up and you'll test at what they call the studio level, the producers. If you move past that, oftentimes you'll have a second test at the network level, where it'll be down to at most 3 of you. And then usually it's hi David. Then usually it's contracted to where they have either 24 or 48 hours to let you know if the role is yours or not. And then you'll shoot the pilot. And then you might wait 3 months to find out if the pilot goes to series. And I've known people to book a pilot, it go to series, and then wait almost 9 months before they go back to work. Depending on if they're going to use it for the beginning of the next season or the middle as a mid-season replacement. So it really just depends. So the process can be quite long. Recurring characters, the ones who pop in for an episode here or there, oftentimes will be almost as quick as a guest star, but sometimes they'll take a little more time if it's a character that has a major arc. Has been my experience.
Yeah, like Billy Dollars. You're in a series called Dollars.
$1. Yeah. So $1. I auditioned for one role, screen tested for it, didn't get it. Got a call from the casting director, because she's a dear friend of mine, to say, I think the director's going to write you a role, which I'd heard, Chewy. So I'd heard before. Oh, there's one of my castmates, Lindsay. She was in the show with me. And I'd heard of this before, but it never actually happened. Hi, Linz. And so I just thought, oh, like, what a nice thought. He's thinking of me today. Hey, Phil. And that's really nice. I went to Australia actually to teach an acting workshop in Sydney and Melbourne. And while there, I got the call saying that when I got back to LA, I would have to put an audition down for this second role. And then I found out that I think I was, in the end, the only guy that they sent to network. And I wound up being lucky enough to work with Lindsay and Phil in Pittsburgh for 7 months, where we had some of the greatest times of our lives. Like another job, much like the Pacific, where we all became a big family, big time. Yeah.
Let's talk about the Tangle, because I really loved that film. I hope we can watch it soon enough. It's a sci-fi film. I mean, I like Chris. I'm a sci-fi fan here, you know, and I really love the idea of this situation where there is like an interrogation, like. And actually, I think it's a subgenre. It's a sci-fi movie, but it's the suspense interrogation, you know,
The
genre.
noir film, yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, how did you approach that character? Chris called you to do this character, and then how was the process of becoming, you know, the character?
So Chris called me. We'd done a short together that was really, really challenging, really fun, really, you know, successful as far as short films go. And he said, I wrote you a part. And then, so first I'm thrilled, right? And then he sends me the script, and I realize what I'm reading, though it's set in the future and though it's a sci-fi film by nature, feels like a 1930s, 40s noir film. One location, interrogation, and also because Chris is maybe one of the 3 smartest people I've ever met in my life when it comes to just intellect. It was filled with poetry. Chris is a lover of poetry, and I realized that if I was going to play the role, that I was going to have to approach it like it was Shakespeare. That I was going to have to find the rhythm and the music of the language, and also how to turn poetic language into action, into pursuing something. So it was a challenge. It forced me to go far more specific. I mean, to be honest, sometimes, and I'm proud of that film. I think we did a really good job. I mean, we made it for, you know, almost nothing, but there are things that I sometimes watch and want to go back and go, oh, you missed the language there. There's more magic in it, you know? But we shot in a warehouse, maybe 2 hours or an hour and a half south of LA, and we would be there every single day for 12 to 15 hours. And so, and our set designer, Eric Thorne, really built what felt like you were in this enclosed noir world, that it started to sort of seep in, sort of, you know, where I started noticing on set that the way we would address each other had a little bit of Chris's poetry in it, and a little bit of that kind of noir, dark sort of magic to it. Because after speaking that text for that long, it started to inhabit, I think, part of our natural rhythms. But I mean, even the look when we were talking about it, and that my head would have to be shaved bald, and which, by the way, there's photographs somewhere of Nicole Da Silva shaving my head.
I found that picture.
Yeah, so Nick is one of my closest friends on the planet. She lives in Australia now, and that became part of it too. And that was one of the amazing things too, because all she did in that movie was abuse me, beat me, threaten me, and because we were so very close, I was able to say to her, "You do whatever it is that you feel the need to do," and she did. The other thing that you should note is that Chris and I have done 2 films together so far, and in both films, Chris tortures me, and I just wonder what deep-seated secret resentment Chris has that he won't reveal to me. But that was a real labor of love. I've been talking to Chris and Jessica quite a bit lately, and It sounds like they might have finally picked, because they had a number of options on who they want to distribute the film. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it'll actually become available to the public, because we definitely got some crowdfunding help, and people very patiently have waited to see this film, and I'm really hoping we're able to get out. Like you said, it's a genre piece. It's very different, and to me, that's what I'm most proud of. Is it has its own rhythm. It sort of slows down time, you know. So it was a lot of fun.
Yes, it's like for me it's like a theater play, and yeah, I promote when I did the interview with Chris. I promote his films, also the Tangle. So when it's released, of course, I'm going to talk about the Tangle, so people in Latin America can see it, because it's so well done, really. I mean, the writing. I hope you do more films.
We've been talking about doing another one, and also another remarkable director of photography, Robert Moratori. And Robert lives in Colorado. He's quite busy as a filmmaker, but does a lot of documentaries and a lot of things like that. Like what that guy can do with no budget, because he also shot Chaucer. He makes things look like Academy Award winning cinematography films. I think he's, and his style changes to the piece. So I'm hoping we all make another film. Actually, right before COVID hit, I was prepping to shoot my first short that I wrote and was going to direct, and Robert was going to shoot it for me. And I was working on I'm trying to get Chris and Jessica to produce it, but they've been busy trying to get this next film up. So hopefully we all get back to that soon. I would really look forward to it.
Are you filming right now, or no?
No, actually, last night I did a very, very interesting, one of the more interesting pieces of theater I've ever done, and it was all done over Zoom. A playwright named Andrei Kurechik, who wrote a play in the last month while in hiding from President Lukashenko in Belarus, because he's one of the leaders of the opposition, and every other member of his party had been arrested. And he wrote a play about the brutality and what was really going on there. And a former student of mine, her uncle happens to be his translator. So he translated the play and sent it to us. It's called Insulted Belarus. And now I think we were the English language premiere. There are over 40 theater companies around the world, and it is expanding and growing, who are going to present this play over and over and over again, and then put it on YouTube and put it on IGTV and put it anywhere we can to try and spread the word about the brutality of this dictator. And in the middle of us casting it, rehearsing it, Andre escaped Belarus, and I believe is in the Ukraine or in Lithuania. I'm not sure, and it's probably best that I don't know. But when we did the reading last night, he showed up and he watched it, and we had a talk back with him. So that was definitely the most, and it also, that was sort of one of the more important things I feel like I've done in quite some time. It was great to act again, but more importantly, it reminded me of why I got into this. You know, we go in, we're artists, we hope to change the way people think and help society grow. And here I am, as he's telling us the stories of the real people that he based the characters on, and some of their ends are quite painful and tragic. And so things are just starting to come back to life. There's a couple of TV shows shooting. There's some shooting in Canada. This last week, I had my first couple of auditions all done over Zoom or done as self-tapes. But it looks like we're starting, you know, the last month, things have started to gear up. So fingers crossed, we get back to work and we can get back to work safely, you know.
Oh, a lot of people ask me also, would you come to Argentina or Latin America or any country in Latin America to do a Spanish film?
Absolutely. Look, I speak a little Spanish, like a little, but I tell you, if I knew I was going there, I would work as hard as I could to perfect my Spanish. I actually, South America is one of two continents I haven't been, three. Let's include Antarctica, but I've never been to South America. I've only been to Central America and North America. I mean, I guess technically, but I've never been to Argentina, Chile, Peru, Brazil, Uruguay, and I would love to go. So the answer is 100% yes, and I will work as hard as I can to get my Spanish good enough to appear in the film. I promise.
Well, a question I always ask to the artist in these interviews are, how would you like to be remembered?
Wow. I think the way I'd want to be remembered is as a good man who, and as an artist, as someone who never didn't always approach roles using my full heart. So, you know, I feel like the more risky, the riskier choice is most often the more vulnerable one. And I would like to hope that I could continue to be that brave in my work, that I always risk something, whether it's risk failure, whether it's risk my heart, whether, you know, but that I think is what how I'd like to be remembered as an artist more than anything.
Yeah, well, I was asking you if you would come to Latin America because, well, I told you that the idea is to start this network, or, you know, to start exchanging, because there's a lot of film directors, writers from in Latin America, Spain, that you know, I'm sure you can know in the U.S. and they are unknown in the U.S. and vice versa. So yeah. This exchange, that's the idea. Well, in my first interview with Chris a year ago, I asked him if he had read Borges, who's an author of Argentina. He said yes, of course. I also sent him a lot of another authors like Bioy Casares, Cortázar. But yeah, I mean, I hope like we can start this exchange, and of course, if we can do like little by little co-productions, that would be great. I mean, it's.
I think it's a brilliant idea. I mean, you and I talked about this briefly. I think the more that those of us in the independent film world can exchange ideas and work together, we can cut out the people who seem to hold the keys to the gate, which is, you know, that we can rely less on them and rely more on each other, and create the kind of work that we really need to, you know, so and want to. So I'm 100% behind that idea, from the smallest way to the largest way. I think that empowers us to, you know, to do the art we want to do.
I will introduce you some directors from here, from Latin America, like I did with Chris, so you can start, you know, maybe, I know in a couple of years. I always introduce people because I always want to, you know, I want things to happen, right? So, like I know when I interviewed Brandon Braga, I told him like, hey, we should do an sci-fi anthology, like mixing everything. I mean, that's the way things happen. Like
yeah, no, I mean, when people say it's a business of relationships, like Johnny right there, who just logged on, one of my dear friends, who's in our business, is that it's this kind of relationship. It's not just like who you know, it's how you know people and how you use those relationships to help other people out. You know, my friend used to call it, there's a phrase, you know, like riding on someone's coattails, where you hold on and they rise. And we used to always talk about that. Some will go up and you bring up people with you. When you go down, they're going to keep you moving up. And with that kind of relationship, you can help each other constantly work and stay involved. And what better thing to do than to help people who you click with, you know? To me, that's it. You know, we're looking for family. We're artists. We want family, you know?
Here I'm right now collaborating with a lot of horror and sci-fi directors. Have you, you know, been in horror productions?
No, it is such a dream of mine. I want to do it in any way. Whether I'm like the third person to get murdered in some horrific fashion, or really, if I could do it, if I could just be some horrific, weird sociopath who's just slowly murdering everyone. I think roles like that, I think that horror movies and fantasy movies, when done well, give actors
Yeah.
this opportunity to go into this kind of like large, beautiful kind of role, you know, that that's just different than doing like something really grounded and you know, it's a different kind of reality. I would kill, pun maybe intended, to do a horror movie. I just think they're the best.
What kind of horror movie you like the most?
Green Room. Um,
Green.
I like films like that. I like films that build this kind of suspense that becomes so uncomfortable to watch because you know it's gonna happen. You know, uh, I think films like that are because when they're smart, you know, like I think that Us is a horror movie, you know, a thriller,
Yeah.
and I think because it's a horrific idea that he's so brilliantly in this, you know, he so brilliantly brought to life that watching it, I got more and more tense, more and more worried, and I think if you can create that kind of experience in an audience, you've really done something special, you know.
Yeah, you know, Jordan Peele is going to do he's going to produce the remake of Candyman. I don't know
Yes.
if you watched.
I
So
love Candyman. I hope he lets that actor in. Oh,
yeah, Tony Todd. Tony Todd. I tried to reach him, but I couldn't reach him yet. But because I really love that movie, the first one, because again it deals with social issues. The movie, it was filmed in Cabrini Green, and I know the story of Cabrini Green and all
yeah.
that. And I hope Jordan Peele. I really love Jordan Peele. I'm a big fan because when I was in the university, I used to watch Mad TV, and
Yeah.
he start there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when he then got the show with Keenan Peele, he's an amazing writer. I mean, he write very. I mean, comedy is very difficult to write. I mean, there's as an actor, I'm sure you know, people say that comedy is harder to do than drama. Would you
It is.
agree?
It's less forgiving. In drama, you can kind of slide moments this way and that way. And I just got to say, Johnny brought up the movie The Strangers, and I agree. One of the scariest movies I've ever seen. I had a hard time walking my dog late at night after seeing that film. But I feel like comedy is precise and sharp.
Mm.
And you know, Key and Peele were members of an improv troupe in
Oh,
Amsterdam. It's called like Shaka Boom or something like that. It's sort of a long running improv show in the middle of Amsterdam. And I actually, when I went to Amsterdam, we went to go see them do improv, which is interesting because it's all Americans or mainly Americans doing an improv show in a culture that doesn't quite have the same relationship, but it's there that their relationship, from my understanding, boom Chicago. Yes, that's what it is. Boom Chicago. Thank you so much. And and you know, so they really had to develop like what was funny and what wasn't, because they had a less forgiving audience because half the audience is Dutch, and so some things aren't going to really land. And I
mm.
agree, like the sharpness of comedy, it needs to be exact, and
Yeah,
drama can slide a little bit. I think drama is more forgiving for sure.
yeah. And in this case, were talking with an actress, Clara Kovacic, about Jordan Peele's Us and Get Out. And more than horror, they are like very precise writing about, sociological issues. And I think it
Absolutely.
really describes that because, in a way, all the time with us, I felt I didn't feel like it was horror, or more like an essay about something. No,
An
an allegory.
allegory, yes.
Alleg-
And I think what he does that's so brilliant is that these social issues that we're dealing with, they are horror shows. But
yeah.
because people, you know, our country here is so divided, I think what he does is he's able to really shine a light on how horrific that kind of racism is, that kind of uh, all the issues that, you know, that he really brings to light. He frames it in something that feels like a story that we're all just watching, but it's almost impossible to walk away from it, to walk away from Get Out and not think about, you know, the way Black Americans have been and continue to be exploited by the system and by white Americans, whether done on purpose or done out of ignorance. And so to me, it feels like a horror because because it's horrific. And so I think I think he operates at such a high intellectual level that he's able to do that without making it a pedantic, this is what the issue is, but instead giving you this narrative that you get involved with and have and without question think about later. I think it's genius.
Well, you can reach him, and maybe you can be in his next movie.
I listen. I would lift a can of paint, whatever he would want to be involved in his productions. I think he's truly brilliant. Truly brilliant.
Also, another director we were discussing the other time was Ari Aster. I don't know if you know him.
I don't.
Midsommar.
Yeah. Oh.
It's incredible. I mean, this guy, yes, I thought the same thing. I mean, Midsommar and how you say, Hereditary. Oh my God, it's incredible. Because again, I think these experimental horror movies are the basis of a new, a subgenre that because nowadays the mainstream is so they repeat the same formula over and over again, and it's good to have these directors that they want to innovate. Actually, independent film is a breeding ground to new ideas. That's why I love independent film.
That's why it's so important, and it's why when someone like Jordan Peele, who has fame from what he's doing, has the opportunity to make films, he's doing it in this way that he has the budget of a major film, but he's doing it like an independent filmmaker. He's telling stories in a way. I mean, Midsommar's just I don't even and that to me is the experience I want to have with a film. I want to walk out going, what the fuck just happened? What how does someone create in that way that really hits you? Because the other stuff, it's fun. I'll watch it. I would be in it. I would love to do a superhero movie. Why not? How much fun? But the impact of those films and the way they make you sort of think and reframe what's happening in the world, to me is, I mean, I think about the play that I did yesterday, and this play that he wrote is a piece of protest, like a true piece of protest against a true tyrant who is beating and killing people, and fixing elections and this and that. That's the point of art, That's why when tyrannical regimes take over, they go for the educators, the scientists, and the artists, because those are the voices that if they can silence, they have full control. And it's always those groups. So I think it's important that we reconnect, especially here, to those ideas of what it is we can change and what it is we can affect by telling stories in this kind of way that make you walk out of a theater going, oh my God, I didn't know. I had no idea, To me, that's what it's about.
And you told me you wrote your first short.
Yeah.
Do you have any literary influence?
I mean, the writers that I'm most impressed with, I would never ever say I would aspire to be like, because I think that there's a gift that they have that I don't know if that's mine. It's interesting because now my mind draws a complete blank as to all the writers that I love. But like, I read a book recently called On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, that was written by a Vietnamese American writer, and might be some of the most raw, beautiful prose I've ever read. And I read that right before I wrote this short, which is a very personal story to me that involves something when I was a child. And all that kept resonating for me while I was writing it was, don't cut corners with the experience. Don't lie. Don't make it easy to embrace. put the hard stuff in it. And also, because I sent it to writer friends of mine, and they would give me notes, and I would listen to those that were useful to me. But I had to remember that my voice, my point of view was enough to make the story, and that I did not need approval from every person that read it. That, to be honest, if everyone read it and loved it, chances are there was a problem with it. So to me, you know, I mean, Marquez is a writer that I started reading when I was in high school, and his that was super influential. Shakespeare was super influential to me. August Wilson, an American playwright, who I think is one of the greatest playwrights of this century. Stephen Ali Gurgis, a lot of playwrights, because to me they take human behavior and put it into action. When I try to write, those are the things that I just try to remember in terms of story, in terms of, and the ones that I love tend to go raw. They go raw, they go here. And you know, my father's from Morocco, so I'm, hey, John, you know, I'm half Middle Eastern, and there's a passionate kind of expression and freedom with their emotional life that I think I have. And so for me, that's what I want. I want to be moved, you know?
What is the most interesting challenge for an actor in a fantastic genre production?
I think in fantasy, one of the big challenges can be being brave enough because, you know, when you're shooting, you're not alone. There's you know, especially in a big project, there might be 40, 50 people on set. And there are choices you have to make in that kind of genre that can be quite large, quite full and fierce and ferocious. And there, at least for me, there have been moments of fear of judgment, of someone going like, what is that guy doing? I think you have to know. And I don't know how else to put this, not give a fuck what everyone else thinks. I think you have to tell that story and bare your teeth and use that kind of like Shakespearean kind of language and size if necessary. To me, you can do that, then you can do it fully. It doesn't seem too big. Instead, it seems driven, it seems focused, it seems part of the genre. I would say that that's the biggest challenge. And when you key into it, it's the most fun, for sure.
Yeah, actually, the idea of me, I mean, here in Argentina and here in Latin America, we are starting little by little because here the cultural context is very conservative in the sense that they do drama, they do this and horror and sci-fi and fantasy. I like, no, we can't do this. This is not. This is so. But now there are people that are starting to do that. Horror, sci-fi. This guy, Mirror is a guy who's trying to do a fantasy epic here, who's sci-fi. And I think the filmmaking, it's about teamwork, right? Work team. It's working together.
Yeah, teamwork.
Recently,
teamwork.
Yeah. I talked to Alex Cox recently. He's a great guy. You know, Alex is a Walker. And he told me a phrase that it's excellent. He said, if you want to be in the movie business, start making a lot of friends because it's a long road. And that, I think, that is the idea, right?
Yes, this is exactly what you're talking about. Is about creating relationships that you can help sustain one another and make the kind of projects that people want to say no to until they see what you've done and realize they have to say yes to. I mean, I think to me that's kind of everything. And creating friends, you know, like when I worked on the Pacific, we lived as Marines, which we could only do that together if we trusted each other not to judge one another. And I think the same goes for any project. So if you're doing a horror or fantasy film, you need people who are going to support your ideas. You need people who are going to tell you that doesn't work, but what about this? And then you build it together rather than sort of feeling like you're tearing down those experiences. I think it's super key. I mean, for me, it so often comes back to family, building families. I think a film set is a family, a TV set is a family. And if it is, it's going to be a better production. Bryan Cranston, I was lucky enough to work with him once, and he told me that his best friend was one of the camera guys on Breaking Bad. And a lot of people were surprised by that because they thought, well, he's a big star. He probably doesn't even know his crew. But Bryan knew everybody on his crew, and the guy that he became closest with was one of the camera team guys, because he's a person. They became great friends, you know. Thank you, John. That's very kind of you. And John is a brilliant man. His husband is one of the most beautiful artists I've ever seen. What a painter this guy is. Michael Hayden. Everybody should check out his work. And so, but I think that is what, like, that's the energy you want. That's what we had on the Tangle. We were a family. That's what Chris, Jamin, Robert, Kiowa, and I had when we did Chaucer, the short. We were a little family, and everybody was willing to hustle. Everybody was willing to work for free or for very little. And that created something that, you know, is hard, can be difficult to create on that bigger level until you become Guillermo del Toro and you can make your fantastical films, but now with all the bells and whistles, because you made a small film that did well and another film that did well. And you broke out of horror and you went into this, and now you go back to horror because you can. And I think then if you can keep that artistic integrity, then you really make special projects, for sure.
How do you think this the change in technology and this situation of the COVID is going to change the film industry? And whether the how you see what the actors have to change new challenge, and what's the biggest challenge in your opinion?
I mean, you know, the different things are being handled differently. I mean, COVID's tricky because at this point, the way television shows are operating, you have now we have it's like a tiered system. So the actors and the director can be in closer contact. One prop guy can give you your props, but he or she must leave them on a table, and then you walk up and get them. So that kind of family element there, it's now been broken into smaller units of who can operate with whom. And so it's interesting. The other thing is like in places like Canada and Australia where they've been shooting, what they're doing is when you come in to shoot, you must quarantine for 14 days, get tested when you come in and tested when you go out. So, and those countries are doing far better with their numbers than we are here. So because of that, they have a bit more of what feels like a normal shooting world, because everyone has come to work in a, you know, having been vetted. Even still, you know, you're wearing masks when you're not on set, you know, when you're in your chair. Craft services is gone, right? Working in makeup and hair has to be operated a little bit differently for safety precautions. And so I think we're figuring it out, you know, and hopefully it doesn't last too long. And, you know, a vaccine would be great. A solid treatment would be great. A president here who believed it was a threat would be great. But it's, you know, I'm not sure. At this point, I can't really say what the effect is going to be. I know that people are dying to work, and those that are working are super grateful to work. So there's that, you know. I think there'll be more gratitude in what's involved. So hopefully when it's over, we move through it, we will continue to just be more grateful about that we get to do this, that when we work, we play. Because for me, work is the most joyous thing I get to do.
Yeah, actually, here in Argentina, you are already used to live in a crisis. So with the quarantine, a lot of people start doing film. And recently, this actress, I always do these Instagram lives, Clara Kovacic, did a film, a horror film, filmed by Zoom. And it's, I will show you, it's on YouTube, actually. It's very good, and they filmed. It was incredible. The director, I interviewed the director. It's incredible what they have done, and it's in YouTube in a channel called Watch Movies Now. It's a New Zealand company. You should check that out. It's full horror movies made, I think, in New Zealand, Argentina, and there is like a collaboration, and it's incredible. and people actually here, as we are get used to the crisis, we try to do things right. Oh well, we are 7 seconds left. So well, thank you very much for